think there was originally a butcher's shop there, probably had been for many years in one form or another, and he went into it with a Mr. Jordan, and originally it was called Henson and Jordan for a short time, and Mr. Jordan apparently dropped out at some time, the Jordan family, and then my grandfather continued it, and then my father came along, I think, after the First World War. He was probably there before, but he went after, and that's when he took it over. And when it would be at about 1930s when most of the building of the new buildings and the slaughterhouse was done.
My earliest memory of Henson's is standing at the bottom of the yard because I wanted to see the lad who was going to be my husband, and we would stand at the bottom of the yard, and I can remember skins on the floor if I walked up, and the slaughterhouse, the pie shop and the meat shop, and the lady in the office doing the accounts. And I can remember buying some lovely lard, which was quite a luxury then, with rosemary in. I think it was just the fat off the meat, but it was lovely.
Not a lot of memories of the slaughterhouse. It was one of those things that was just there, and it worked very well. Albert Tallis was the head slaughterman at that time. In fact, all the time that I remember he was head slaughterman. The only real remembrance I have is when I worked in there for a couple of days when somebody was bad or on holiday, and they got me cleaning the guts. But I do remember those couple of days. I stuck it for a couple of days, then left it.
My earliest memory is having my name changed. The boss, Mr. Savage, who was the manager of the store, Mr. Henson owned the business, but he had shop managers for his two shops. And the first day I arrived, he introduced me to some of the staff I was going to be working with, and he changed my name from Donald to Wally. My name is Harper, surname, and apparently the story was that he was very friendly with a bookmaker who was called Wally Harper. He lived in Stratford, but I think he was based in Birmingham. And so from that day until now, even now, people refer to me when they see me in Stratford. If I'm in Stratford, they still refer to me as Wally. I'm trying to get rid of that name myself. I'm trying to get back to my old name, but that's it.
Yes, I was 15. So war had broken out, the Second World War, and he advertised for women in the shop, which was unheard of. And I thought, oh, I was fed up with my job, I didn't like it. So I came down, saw Mr. Henson, and he gave me a job. So I was about 15, and I was with him then till well after the war.
Crawling past the slaughterhouse because it's something I didn't relish, but after a few days it just didn't take a lot of notice, you know, and walking past seeing Ken, who would probably pull you in, you know, just to wind you up. A lot of it was good banter. You wouldn't get away with this day and age with the health and safety about, but some of the things we got up to, blimey, we'd end up in court every 2 minutes.
When I left school in 1963, my father was a farmer in Shottery, and he was a friend of Stan Henson's, and my two brothers went to farm college, but I didn't want to go to farm college, so I went to work for Stan Henson's as just a temporary job. That was in 1963, I was 15.
Henson's, well, it was a butcher's shop at top of Bridge Street on the left-hand side going up, and it was a great big shop full of fresh meat with a lot of gentlemen dressed in white overalls and asking you what you would like this morning, madam.
Quite a thing to have girls on the staff. It was unheard of. You didn't have women in butchers and, you know, his type of work. No. Anyway, 2 of us started and we took to it. The men didn't know quite how to take us because they'd never worked with girls before. Played all sorts of tricks on us, but we proved that we were capable.
Earliest memory of working at Henson's was we used to have such a lot of fun. Real good fun, very busy. We worked from 6 o'clock in the morning, we worked really hard all day long till 5 o'clock at night, and there was never ever a dull moment. It was really good fun working there.
The two shops at the front, once at early days there was only one, and then the saddler's next door, he gave up, and that was incorporated into the whole business, and that was turned into a shop which was called the pork shop, where most of the sausages, pies, cooked meats were all sold in there. Behind that was the bakehouse, which was dedicated to manufacturing of pork pies, which were quite famous at their time and sent round the country, I think, in little cardboard boxes that we used to have. Behind that there was a large steam oven, coke oven, that was probably better than the later gas oven that was put in. Behind that was the big fridge, open-doored fridge that you walked in at both ends. Nobody would ever shut the doors. Then behind that was the lairage where the cattle were kept overnight or while they stayed there. Behind that there was a large bacon fridge where the 20-odd bacon pigs that were slaughtered every week were turned into bacon, which went away usually. Later times we used it ourselves. And of course, back before the war, which a time I don't remember, there was a large production of hams and things like that. And there was a big place on the farm where they were hung and left to hang for how long, I don't know. That was before my remembrance. But that was when they used to produce an awful lot of genuine old type hams, which later became more of the canned variety. Behind the butcher's shop, which was the main shop, was the office where there were probably 3 or 4 girls worked in the office full time, because it seemed that most of the sales, a large amount of the sales, seemed to be done on credit. People would come and have £1 of sausages and book it on credit, and entailed an awful lot of paperwork. Some of them paid for them, some didn't. And behind that was the sausage house, where it was pretty well dedicated to the production of sausages, and they did get up to, I think, about a ton in a week, in my memory, if that was calculated properly. Behind that was the cookhouse, which had some large steam vats in for cooking the hams and all the other things. Then behind that was the hanging room, which was next door to the slaughterhouse, where everything was hung after it was slaughtered. It was hung there and left to cool off and set before it was moved the following day. It wasn't mauled about when it was slaughtered. It was hung properly and left to hang.
There was slaughterhouses everywhere. Most butchers like Henley and Arden, Shipston on Stour, Longcompton, Ulster, they'd all got their own slaughterhouses. You don't see any now. It's all done in one place.
Well no, it was hard work lifting the 4 quarters up onto the hooks and that, you know. And then we had electric hoists in the end, and we used to swing them up and hook them on them.
I did a little bit in the pie room that was next door to the pork shop, if Mr. Smith was terribly busy. And then opposite that was the sausage house, we called it, where all the sausages were made. I used to stand there and make sausages and link them, and I learned how to do that. I learned not to put too much sausage meat in the sausage skins because they used to burst. And then opposite that was a big walk-in fridge, and I didn't like going in there very much at first because the chaps used to shut the doors and put the lights out. And you're in a huge fridge thinking, oh my God, I daren't move, I daren't move. It was only for a couple of minutes, but it was enough to make you feel a bit scared. And then as you went up the yard on the right was the slaughterhouse. And I watched them slaughter animals. They were very good, actually. You read of all these terrible things that they do, but they were as humane as they could possibly be.
You had the shop, you had the office, and next to the office was a cutting room. A chap called George Fairbrother, who I trained under, he would present the meat, he would cut the carcass of meat up, and he would present it in such a way that it would be presented nicely at the front of the shop. But in those days we used to prepare the carcasses, and they would hang down both sides of the shop, and at the back of the shop would be the bodies of beef, quarters of beef, which we used to fat. Now we used to use fat on the outside of the carcasses and put patterns in them, especially at Christmas time. We would leave the towels on and wash the towels out as well. So it was quite a nice picture of a butcher shop in those days. It's not the same now because of health and whatever. They won't allow you to do that sort of thing now, probably because of temperature control.
I can remember it when it was absolute basic, and Mr. Henson did improve things there all the time. He was a very modern man, Mr. Henson. He would all the latest equipment. We always had it scales. Avery's used to bring them to here, to Stratford, for us to trial them out. You know, before they could to make sure they were up to standard. You know, that sort of thing. No, I think it's a good idea. I'm looking forward to seeing it when it's finished.
When I first started in 1964, Baxter's did own the business then, but over my time there, it stayed as Henson's for years and years and years, until they had to re-modernise the shop, like where we weren't allowed to display meat in the open. We had to have a front, windows put in, and refrigerated counters and things like that. So Baxter's invested a lot of money in the new shop, so they named the shop Baxter's. But Baxter's had owned it, the business, for a long period of time, and they never ever changed it because it was doing so well and so good up until they had to do something about it.
When I first started there, I was riding a bike, delivery bike all round Stratford, up Tiddington Road to the big posh houses up Tiddington Road, Maidenhead Road. And then when I was in the shop, between that sort of thing, I was cleaning, sweeping, polishing walls, washing trays, fetching and carrying, general dog's body. Enjoyed every minute of it.
I first started in 1964. I went there to make sausage rolls, pork pies, meat and potato pies, anything savoury in pastry for what they called the pork shop. The pork shop is the opposite side to the meat shop. The fresh meat was sold on the left hand side and the pork shop was on the right hand side, like the opposite side to the slaughterhouse as it is at the moment. And we made everything on the premises there.
Well, to start with, I worked in the shop, and because I was the youngest, I got the job of riding the bicycle to deliver meat in Stratford and surrounding areas. Quite a tough job, because it got a big basket on the front. It wasn't the easiest bicycle to ride, and of course sometimes you had lots of deliveries.
I think Mr. Henson wanted me to go through all the different stages: the shop, slaughterhouse, cutting room, the bakery and the cooked meat shop. That was over a course of time, you know.
I worked with a couple of other lads in that, you know. And then we had apprentices as well who was learning the trade. We did. But we used to have a fun with it, you know. It was hard work, but we had a laugh in that, like, you know. There was always something going on, you know, so you could have a good laugh.
My husband was Terry Taylor. He began at Henson's as the bike boy, going around the town, delivering to the hotels, I would imagine, and things like that. He then went on to be in the bakehouse, and latterly became head of the bakehouse as master pieman. He left because the wages were quite low in those days, and we'd got married, and he actually went then to the brewery.
My first role, when I started in 1964, I went there. I started actual work at Pargeters, in the bakery at Pargeters, and I could see my potential, and I was headhunted to go to Henson's to help out in their pork shop side, and I started there as the baker, cook, patisser, whatever you like to call it, and I enjoyed the first 12 months. And later in the days, when we'd finished the work there, I used to go over to the meat side and started to learn how to cut the meat up and do all the jobs on the fresh meat side.
That was hard work, and and cleaning we called it scrubbing the block, which was a white block. The butcher side had a huge block they used to cut the meat on, but we had a smaller one, and you scrubbed it with sawdust and a very heavy brush, and I was hardly tall enough to scrub with this brush, but that was hard work. And then we swept the shop every night and scattered sawdust, fresh sawdust down. It used to smell nice then, it used to smell nice. And that's how I met my husband, actually, going down to Cox's once I drove the van to get bags of sawdust, and he worked down there. So, and they always sent me down because they knew that my husband would keep me a bag of nice white sawdust. So I was always sent down for the sawdust. So.
I became a slaughterman by default, really, because I started, if you remember, I started there as a temporary job in the shop, and then I got sort of promoted to the cutting room with George Fairbrother, and one of the slaughtermen left to go to work on the building site with Dave Simpson, the pie maker. And after a couple of weeks, unfortunately, he died in a trench collapse. But I picked up his job in the slaughterhouse, and the slaughterhouse at that time was Albert Tallis, an older gentleman, and Ken Church, and they taught me the trade. In fact, they taught me the trade quite harshly, I will say, because if my knives weren't sharp, they would throw them up the yard and say, start again. They wanted perfection, and perfection was what Henson's was about at those days.
There was a lot of characters that worked at Henson's. Ben Crow, he'd only got one leg. We called him Peggy, for obvious reasons. He was the poultryman. He was the head poultryman. And he was a character, a Yorkshireman in the Midlands, which didn't go on too well with the Midlanders, because Yorkshire people tend to be a bit different to the rest of us. Victor Van Luke, who was a Belgian, he come from Belgium, and he was a sausage maker. Brought a lot of different recipes with him to the firm. He was in the war, and he stayed in Britain, married an English lady, and he stayed here after the war. But there was characters in their own way, you know. We had Bill Parsons, who was very old. He used to work. I think we used to work 2 days doing deliveries around the country rounds, because we had a lot of country rounds in them days, you know.
The biggest character, it's got to be Ken Churchill, Whiskers as we used to call him, and he was part of the fixtures and fittings. He was there for years, and he did all sorts of things. He slaughtered first part of the week into the shop on a Friday. He had all his customers who specially come to see Ken Churchill. Well, we all did. When I worked in the shop later in my career there, we all had a queue. If you wanted to go and see Ken Churchill, you stood in a certain part of the shop. If you wanted to come and see me, you stood in a certain part of the shop. Or if you wanted to see Jim Curry, you stood in another certain part of the shop. We all had our own, if you like, favourites, or the customers had their favourite butcher, whichever you'd like to call it.
I always remember a chappie named Crow. He had a wooden leg from the First World War. He lost his leg. He had a stump, a wooden stump like a pirate. And if he flicked you across the bottom with that stump, it didn't half hurt. He thought that was ever so funny. And then one day, he had, after he came out First World War, I suppose, he ran a poultry farm and whatnot. And anyway, this particular day, I was told to go and help Peggy, which we called him, but his wife didn't like it, but still, do this poultry. And I thought, oh well, another string to the bow. And I got there and plucking the poultry, and that was all right, I didn't mind that. And then he said, right, now you're going to gut it. And, oh no, I'm not. Oh yes, you are. The next thing I knew, my hand was inside a chicken, and I learned how to do that and get them all ready for the oven. So that was something else I learned.
He came, Victor Van Luke, he was a Belgian, he was in charge of the cooked meats and everything. He was a character, he was, yeah.
Well, the biggest character, that's interesting because there was lots of characters. Vic, who run the sausage room, he was a Belgian man who won many awards for his sausage making and black puddings and that. He was quite a character. But they were all characters. Ken Churchill, who was the slaughterman who taught me how to slaughter animals, and butchery in general.
One of the things he used to get up to and what he used to do to the apprentice and that, like, you know, he did.
Can you give us an example?
Oh, crikey. Oh, crikey, what did he... Oh, he used to he used to be in the pork pies as well, and he'd make a pork pie and put sawdust in it and cook it and then give it to one of the apprentices, and of course he'd say, hey, I'll try this, and cut it, and it'd be filled with sawdust and not meat.
Slaughtermen were a pair to the self. Slaughtermen, they were tended to be a bit bullish and that sort of thing, you know. We had one from Jack Harris from Henley in Arden. He was quite a character. Ken Churchill, as you've already spoken to, he was in the slaughterhouse. And Colin Padby, he was in the slaughterhouse at the same time as him. They were all good, you know. We had some laughs, a lot of laughs, you know, happy days.
The meat was delivered to Henson's alive. It went in between the two shops through a pair of blue gates. They opened it up, they backed the lorry up, and they let the live animals run up the back to go into the lairage. They call it the lairage, where they keep the live animals overnight so they could settle, de-stress, ready for the next day. Everything
was slaughtered on the premises. So the cattle wagons used to turn up and reverse into the passage to get up to the closest to the, there was a passageway between the two shops to let the cattle off. And they always bring the cattle on a Saturday morning because they had to be in the lairage over the weekend. And the one day there was a farm that in the Cotswolds that sent some cattle in, and they couldn't get them off the wagon, and it held all the traffic up right the way down to Bridge Street, right over the bridge, up the Banbury Road, Shipston Road, all that was all clogged up with traffic, so they couldn't get past the cattle wagon. So in the end he had to take them away. Came back the next week with the same cattle, but this time the stockman from the farm came with them, and they followed him off as if they were dogs, trained dogs. You know?
Well, in my day, because I was a slaughterman, there used to be a market by the railway station, and they used to go and buy the animals from there. So there'd be sheep, pigs, bullocks, and they were delivered by cattle wagon, which used to close Bridge Street off while they were being delivered, and we would have the live animals run up the yard to the back, what we call lairage pens or livestock pens at the back of the shop. So that's how they were delivered, and of course the same day or the next day we would start slaughtering them.
Oh, they used to love it, used to love this. Yeah, they used to stand and watch us unload the cattle and that. And when the Americans, when Stratford had a lot of American tourists, they used to take photographs of it, they did.
Well, I delivered it on a bike to start with, a trade bike, and got a basket on the front, and I used to, I'd say, go all over the place on that. And I had a brand new bike as well. Brian Henson, one day he called me to the, and they'd had a brand new bike built with a name on it, Henson's, James Henson, the name of the company was James Henson, with a phone number on and everything. And that was quite very exciting, that was.
Well, most of it was bought on the hoof, like, you know, it was all live and driven up the yard and then slaughtered and brought back down on rollers, it was. Because we had all rollers right the way down into the shop, all round the shop, in the slaughterhouse, the hanging room. It was all pushed around, like, you know.
When I got to 17, Mr. Henson, or SR as we called him, but he didn't know that, called me in the office and said, it's your birthday today, isn't it? And I said, yes, sir. Right, he put car keys, I learned, well, van keys, and he said, there you are, then you're going to learn to drive the van. Oh, I'd never sat in a car, let alone in a van, or thought of driving one. But Jack Mount took me up to the farm, Henson's farm. I had a few goes on in a field, and then was brought down to Bridge Street, and I was driving the van. Brian came out with me a couple of times because I needed someone supposedly with me for a couple of times, but the next thing I was doing a town round, we called it, the hotels and things. And then Fridays and Saturdays I did a country round. And my first country round was hilarious because there were no signposts or anything up. They'd all been taken down because of the war. I knew where Luddington was and that was about it. Anyway, I got across to Binton and I had a van with Henson's purveyor of meat and blah, blah, blah on it. I had delivered to this woman and I was in my butcher's whites. It was obvious I was. And I said, could she tell me how to get to the Graftons? No. Oh. You might be a spy for all I know, and she wouldn't tell me where the Graftons were. So I asked another chappie in the village and he told me. And that's how I did my first round, asking where this was. And it was a big round, actually. I used to do Luddington, Binton, the Graftons, Longmarston. It was quite a big round, Welford. But after a week or two, I loved it. It was nice. I used to get out about 7:30 in the morning and I was my own boss then for the rest of the day.
The slaughtermen were always very proud of what they had produced.
Oh yes, yeah, fantastic meat displays. It was an open fronted shop. We had to take the shutters out. We did vast displays, carcasses hanging all round, pigs, sheep, lambs, cattle, sides of beef, and then at Christmas we turkeys, chickens, ducks, all ready for being dressed for Christmas, and suckling pigs on the slabs at the front of the window with big displays of meat, big pieces, which you don't see now in shops, you know, it's all different.
Packaged, very loosely called packaging. When we served a customer, whether it was in the fresh meat side or whether it was in the pork shop side, we used grease-proof paper and white cap paper. I believe the white cap paper then, it was the paper that went to be newsprint as well. It used to be delivered in big bales into the street, and we used to have to cut these up and pass them under the stairs, down into the cellar, stack them in the cellar, and then when we wanted paper to wrap the meat up, we had to go and fetch it, cut it up on the bandsaw into pieces big enough to put a piece of meat in.
We used to dress the poultry, pluck the turkeys at Christmas, and where you're going to have your exhibition, that was where the poultry house was, but it was only very small, and there'd be 3 or 4 of us working in there, plucking the turkeys or the chickens and all that. The feathers would build up on the floor. And I've spoke about Ben Crow. We used to get him going because one of us, just say this one, but when you kill a bird, it still has flaps about for a few seconds afterwards, and we used to just throw the bird while it was flapping into all the pile of feathers, and they'd be going everywhere, and Ben Crow would be shouting and bawling at us, and he could run. He'd chase after whoever had done it. He'd chase after them, and give us a, and he could run even though he got on the one leg. He was very fast. Lots of little things like that.
The lambs we used to carry down the shop, yeah, when the spring lambs used to come in, we used to carry them down on our shoulder, because used to have the cow fat and everything round them and have them on display and have them all back set, and that we did. Yeah. It was a work of art really in them, because we were, like Brian said, we were proud of what we'd done, and you made a good job of it, and you used to stand back and say, well, that looks very nice, and people used to come in the shop and there'd be a lot of folks used to look at it, and so it wasn't like it is today,
The meat was displayed open. We had carcasses at the back, we had chickens hanging up, we had turkeys hanging up down the sides, and it wasn't a very big display, it was large pieces of meat that the butchers could cut from that was displayed on the front. A few pork chops were cut, a few lamb chops were cut, but mainly when customers come in, we actually asked them what they want, and they said a few lamb chops, so we would go up the back and fetch a few lamb chops and cut them in front of them.
The Stratford Mop Time, the Hensons always used to display they used to dress the carcasses for the ox roast and the pig roast, and they put displays on for them, for people to come and look at during the night. The lights stayed on till 10 o'clock at night, and then someone come down and locked all the shop up again. And that was our first job the next morning, was clearing everything out so we could start our normal day's work.
What's memorable for me is my grandfather was a butcher when he was 14, just round the corner. And in those days, they used to have a pig roast and an ox roast on the Mop Fair day outside nearly every public house in the town. Now, Ken Churchill and I used to kill 2 bacon pigs, which were put on show in the butcher's shop to be spit roast, one by the Old Red Line in Bridge Street and one by the Seven Stars in Rother Street. And we took a lot of pride in making sure those pigs looked absolutely perfect for roasting.
The big treat was to go down before the mop and see the ox in the window, all dressed up, ready for cooking on mop day.
That made things very difficult with the restrictions, because the slaughterhouse then slaughtered for the whole of the district. It was kind of taken over by the ministry as the 2 slaughterhouses in Stratford, and the meat for other butchers and all round the district was allocated from those slaughterhouses. And as far as the shops go, to try and cut a chop into 2 and say, well, that's all you can have this week, it all became very difficult. And large quantities of big cans of corned beef chopped up into little pieces. It did make serving your public very difficult, obviously, but I think they all took to it and accepted the fact, and the coupons and the, oh dear. You get odd people would try to get double their ration, but just odd ones.
I can remember the queues. You had a few sausages come down into the shop, and within seconds there was a queue waiting for their half a dozen sausage or whatever we could let them have, because they weren't rationed. And anything that wasn't on ration, there was a queue within minutes. You thought, well, how does it get around that we have best? No.
They were handmade, and of course it was good meat as well, because we've got the cutting room, we've got the sausage room, and they made sure that good meat went into the pies. So there was no rubbish went into the pies. It was all good meat and good pastry, and they were renowned for all their pastry products.
Well, the quality, we only had good quality stuff. We never had no rubbish. There was nothing, no rubbish never went up the yard. It was all top quality stuff, like, you know. And it was always hung well and treated, you know, handled properly and with respect, and that it was.
Because no rubbish in them. It was pure. I can remember, Vic, the sausage meat and that, it was just pure. Nothing was bought in. Everything came in, walked in, and everything came out in pies, sausage meat and that, you know. So I can't remember a lot of stuff being brought in. So it was not the byproduct, it was the product of the pork coming in, and Vic used to make up the ingredients across to the bakehouse and be cooked. So they were popular because they were always fresh and they were always hot. And there was no, like meat and potato, it was pure meat and potato. That was it.
They were fresh. They were made. We used to make the pork pies on a Monday, bake them, jelly them, ready for sale on the Tuesday. They were always fresh. One of the things that always sticks in my mind, when you went to work at 6 o'clock on a Saturday morning, you'd made everything all the week ready to sell over the busy weekend, and on a Saturday morning you started work making sausage rolls. You used to make 12 dozen at a time on a big table, put them in the oven, bake them off, and we were making sausage rolls continuously from 6 o'clock on a Saturday morning till 2 or 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, and they were sold hot and taken into the shop hot, and they were just bought and straight out, continuously making sausage rolls. Always sticks in my mind, that does. And everything else we'd made through the week, we sold through the weekends, and then we had to start again fresh Monday morning, making everything for the next day, and so on. As it just a complete treadmill. You did the same thing on a Monday, and you did the same thing on a Tuesday, week after week after week, and everything was so fresh.
A lot better than it is today. It's not vacuum packed, it was cut fresh that day. Not a lot came out of the fridges from the day before we sold it. As I say, go back to health and safety, those days everything was cut. You bought it, you cooked it that day. The pies, the sausage, they wouldn't last more than 2 days. There's no rubbish in them, you know, just pure meat. You know, I used to, in the bakehouse, used to make the pies, they'd fly out the door, hot. The following day, we'd turn them into sausage and that. You couldn't extend it anymore. It wasn't full of sell-by dates of 3 months on. You know, it just didn't, it was like homemade stuff. You make it one day, you have to eat it. So the meat was displayed fairly. We used to hide a bit of the fat, you know, the bits that people didn't like. There's a key to that. But that's done today, you know. But the thing is, you could turn it over and see it. But it's open display. There's no fridges as such, you know. Because then again, it didn't stay around long.
Well, the original pies were all hand raised, which some are still these days, and the meat put into them would have been best meat, not anything collected up. It was always best meat was used, because there was always for the manufacturing side, there was always a ready supply of good meat that came back out of the butcher's shops. Anything that was in the shop for one day and wasn't sold, it didn't kind of get presented the next day. It would be into manufacturing, so every day there was a good supply of good meat for the manufacturing, and there was very little bought for manufacturing. I don't ever remember seeing a cow or anything like that go up the yard. I don't think there was ever that happened, which these days a lot of the manufactured meat would be from older animals, but it was always best meat that went into that slaughterhouse.
Oh yeah, we had one. I used to unload the cattle on a Tuesday night from the sale, and Smith and Clark used to deliver them. And the driver said, "Ken, we got quite a wild one here." So I said, "Oh, all right." And then they dropped the ramp and it went over the top of me, went down Bridge Street, along Waterside, up the Evesham Road, and then it come over Sanctus Bridge, and where the Salmon's Tail is, it was all cars along there, and it went on the path, and these two chaps come along and shoot it, and it went over the top of this car, all on the bonnet, brand new car it was. And the girl, they went in, the police were there as well, and they went in and said to this girl who owns a number of this car, he said, "I do, boy." And I said, "Well, we just had a beast over the top of it." He said, "You're kidding, aren't you?" And this beast had gone over the top of this car. Oh, crikey. That was one of the most things it sticks in my mind, it does.
Animals were always escaping. And that was quite, you know, we chased one down to wolves one day. As it went in one door, as we went in one door to chase, it came out the other door, you know. Then we had to carry it up. I think it's me and Ken, or me and one of his colleagues that got killed about the same, in that era, carrying back up the street, squeaking and that, and everybody shouting at us, you know. It was, you can't treat animals like that. I thought we're carrying it. Then they'd come in on a Saturday and buy a lump of it, you know, just I don't think people like to see people think animals alive, but then they go in the shop, I'll have a bit of that.
Oh, only one Christmas we were killing pork pigs from Mr. Mason of Loxley. He used to supply the pork pigs with us, and this one got away and went down the yard, and at the top of Bridge Street there's a Christmas tree, and he went under the Christmas tree, this little pork pig did, and I grabbed him by the leg and got him. And you know, in the evening it was in the paper, the one that got away. In the evening paper, somebody had took a photograph of it and put it in the paper. You know.
What shall I say? Where shall I start? Animals getting away? When there was a problem and Ken thought there might be an escape, he used to shout, "Close the gates! Close the gates!" And the butchers used to run out the shop, close the gates, because they knew there was an escapee. And on one or two occasions we didn't close the gates fast enough, and we've had cattle run across the street, down the street, into the tennis courts by the theatre. We've had them run up the Warwick Road into a field, and we've had to leave them where they are and go and fetch them the next day when they'd calmed down. And on one occasion we had a bullock get away from the slaughterhouse, and he was running down the yard, and we managed to close the gates. And this bullock turned round to run back up the yard and suddenly decided to go upstairs into the storeroom above the pork shop, and it stayed there all day, all night, staring at the front window into Bridge Street. And we had to leave him there, and he had to come down on his own because we couldn't get him down. Just smashed the place up, he did. But he finally come down on his own. But the funniest one, and it'll always stick in my memory, is we had a small pig get away at Christmas time. And there was 3 of us running up Bridge Street to catch this pig, and all it was doing was running round and round the island underneath the Christmas tree, and us 3 butchers were chasing it. None of us thought about stopping and catching it when it come towards us. We just chased it round and round the Christmas tree for quite some time, but we finally caught him, and we made the Birmingham Mail. It was in the papers, all sorts of things. Very good.
They were a bit cruel in the slaughterhouse. There was a big vat in their slaughterhouse which they used to get the hairs off the pig with. It was boiling water, and they had a hoist to lift the pig up and drop it into this big vat, the boiling water. And it happened to me once. Jack Harris in particular caught hold of me, and he tied me to the hoist and hoisted me up and lowered me not quite into the water, head first. He only did it the once. I think he did get a good bit of a telling off over that one. But
It's not funny, but it's how it was. I can remember the day vividly. We were going to the ladies' hockey final in Wembley, and obviously starting very early in the morning. And I had a pie with my name on that he'd baked, especially. I think it was my birthday, and all my friends in the back seat, we all had pies that he sent us off with. And as I've said before, I wasn't wooed with flowers or chocolates. It was white pudding and pies with my name on.
I think probably the cash register, because when I was a child it was pounds, shillings and pence, and in some shops they had, so that, because money can get very dirty, they had what you had to pay was put in a little bullet sort of shaped thing, and then it was put on a wire and it whizzed across the shop and ended up at the cashier's till. She would give you your change, it would whiz back again. The person who was serving you would untwizzle this thing and then give you your change. But in Henson's, which is what we're talking about, they had a till which was a bit like a television set but in steps, and then a glass at the top which said pounds, shillings and pence. And you give the money and they'd say it was your bill today, madam, comes to £3, 4 and a penny, and the whole lot of keys like a typewriter, and they go boom, and what you had to pay came up across the top in letters, and the drawer would come whizzing out with all the change in it, a bit like the drawer in the till in Open All Hours, and with a can of Coke on the top. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And of course with Ronnie Barker it came whizzing out and his can of Coke fell off. So the till came out and there says £10, 4 and a penny, so your change would be 15 and 11 pence. So out of the till came your, and they'd hand it to you to make sure you got the right change.
There was a young lad, Jim Moore, he worked generally, lived at Loxley. And his dad was a farmer, and Jim was a well-built lad. He was just well-built. And I wasn't exactly slim in those days. And I've known Jim pick me up and throw me over his shoulder just for a laugh. Me screaming put me down.
Mark and I got married in 1970 in October, and we got married at Alveston Church, and of course Mark was working at Henson's then, and when we came back through town in our wedding car in all our finery, we had to pull up in Bridge Street outside the shop, and all the butchers came out and the people out of the pork shop, they all came out to see us, and it was absolutely wonderful. We felt like film stars, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
And then some years later, 3 years later, I was pregnant with our son, Clark, and I was working at Barclays Bank. I was one of the people who witnessed the pig up the Christmas tree incident. And I remember all of us girls standing in the windows looking at this blessed pig with it. They said, come and see, quick, your husband's running around the Christmas tree chasing a pig. But as I was walking up to work each day, I parked my car down on Bridge Foot, and I walked up Bridge Street each morning. And often when you're pregnant, you fancy things. And my fancy was, as I walked past the butchers in the morning, Mark was busy working, and each morning I walked past, Vic Van Luke, bless him, he was the most lovely man, and he made the most wonderful faggots. And each morning as I walked past going up to the bank, he would be waiting in the alleyway with a bag with a faggot in it for me to eat, and I couldn't wait to get back to the bank to be able to eat my faggot. It was absolutely delicious.
Who, Peggy?
Yeah.
Well, I put Leslie in because there was a covered way between the shops. So I put my pram very nicely in the side alley and did what I had to do, and when I came back, there's this baby of less than a month old sucking a raw sausage.
We had a lot of funny customers. They liked to joke, and we had always joking, laughing and joking. That is very good. I can remember one incident. Next door to Henson's, there used to be a chemist called Brownlow's, and halfway up the yard there was an entrance into the back of Brownlow's, and we thought for a joke one day that I went and fetched a small box, cut a hole in the bottom, and I packed it with they call it cotton wool, and went into the slaughterhouse, got some fresh blood, put it around the cotton wool, put my finger through the box at the bottom, went down into the shop with the customers, and I said, "Oh dear," I said, "I've had an accident," and took the top off and showed my finger surrounded with blood in this box, and the customers thought it was really funny. They knew it wasn't real. But yes, we used to have a lot of jokes and like that.
As I say, when we started, they pulled all sorts of jokes on us. And in the pie room, that was the only warm place on the premises, because there was no heating, you weren't allowed heating. And so if you wanted to warm yourself, you went and stood by the oven in the pie room, if you could get away with it. And in there was a huge bin that they used to deliver the flour and empty it into this bin. And it was our habit, we hung our coats on the oven because it was warm. You put your coat on and then you'd sit on the edge of this bin, whose lid was never closed, it should have been, but it never was, and have a little gossip. And the men thought it very funny to walk past you and do that, and you found yourself in the flour bin. And got out covered in flour. I mean, hygiene. You didn't think about that. I know, I've been covered in flour many a time.
But yeah, there's quite a lot of stories. A lot of them, as I say, were probably unprintable. The things we used to get up to, locking each other in the fridge, tying ourselves up. I know one day I thought I was a self-defense expert. There's me and a guy, isn't that Raymond, I think it was, in the fridge messing around with knives, and I was trying to show him how you dodge somebody stabbing you, and he went straight through my hand, you know. So that was another trip up to the hospital. But it's things like that, you know. As I say, I was just locking each other in the fridges and messing around, and some of it's quite painful, tweeting. But as I say, these days it's not the done thing. Shame really, because it hardened you off and you had a bit of fun. A lot of bruises, a bit of fun though.
It makes me smile. I really enjoyed my many, many years at Henson's. We had good fun, and it was just a really nice place to work. The fellas were good. We had a friendly family. Well, family. Me and my brother worked there. The Hunt brothers worked there. There was Philip Hunt, Tony Hunt, Chris Hunt. They all started from boys on a Saturday, and they all progressed through. And it was really family orientated. There was Stanley Henson, the father of Brian Henson, used to work there on a Friday and a Saturday. Brian Henson used to work there on a Friday and Saturday. Very good. Jim Curry was the manager. Ken Churchill was the slaughterman, then in the shop. Vic Van Luke used to make the sausages and the black pudding and cook all the cooked meat there. Everything was done on the premises. It used to walk in the back or the front, whichever you like to call it, alive, and it used to be processed through the week, cooked, sold as meat, turned into sausages, made into pork pies, made into sausage rolls, meat and potato pies, veal and ham pies, game pies, you name it, we made it. I even made bread at Henson's in the bread strike. It was really good, that was.
Enjoyed it, and I stayed in the trade all my life, and even now at 75 I still do a bit of butchering for a farm near where I live, he finds me. Sometimes he's got some sheep or an odd cattle to butcher, so I go out and do him for perhaps a day's work or 2 days' work. Not very often, but just now and again, which keeps my hand in, you know. So I still know, you never forget. It's like falling off the bike, you know, you just keep going.
I was surprised. I thought it had all been knocked down. I did, you know. I never knew it had been sealed up for 25 years, wasn't it? Yeah. Yeah, I never knew that. I thought it had all been knocked down. Cause, you know, though I lived in Stratford all my life, and I was Stratfordian, I never went up the back, like, you know, until you got in touch with me and Brian. Yeah.
Well, I think it's absolutely wonderful. I'm having the time of my life. I would like to be more involved, but time doesn't perhaps always allow. And there must be so many people in Stratford that have got my memories, and I think they need to come forward and something that we can pass on for generations to come.
I enjoy my time at Henson. In fact, I've still got my knives that I used to use 50 years ago. And being a slaughterman, being a master butcher, because I like to call myself a master butcher because I went through all the parts of it, it's like being a carpenter or a tool maker. It is a skill which you never lose. And you take a pride in it. To be able to take a sheepskin off or a hide off a cow without putting a score in the hide is perfection, and that's how I was taught.
Yes, it certainly brings back memories, and you see things there that bring back little memories of things that are there that you've forgotten all about, I think. Yes. Yes, it's good to see the places used anyhow, for one thing or another.
I was only talking to somebody a moment ago because when you park at the back of Henson still, it was like a time warp. For many, many years it's been a time warp. And for me, I didn't want to see it changed. I know that sounds silly, but it was part of my life. And when I saw it starting to be changed, I thought, oh, I wonder what they're going to do with it. Because this is another bit of history going. And I've been very pleased with what's happening to it. I haven't seen it yet. I'm sure I will enjoy the experience when I do see it, because what I can see outside, it looks as though it's been done sympathetically.